Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. People have mixed views on just how better off we are with social media, but in the study of ancient history, for sharing knowledge and ideas, for discovering new information, well, it can truly be a great thing. There is a thriving community of ancient history enthusiasts on social media, from professors of archaeology to armchair enthusiasts, and on the back of my last video on the origins of the Peruvian stone walls, I received a fantastic tweet from the user called Ramo Lama who sent me a link to a YouTube video. This particular video was historical and educational, and focused on the complicated history of the early people of New Zealand, their cultural heritage and ethnic origins. The video is long, detailed and fascinating, and I've linked it below in the description. It documents a local Maori legend recorded more than 100 years ago by ethnologist Elsdon. He was living amongst a local tribe, known for having fair hair, some with red hair and some with blonde, and Best was told that their ancient ancestors originated in the Persia Indus Valley region, but because of war with the so-called darker-skinned people, they fled their homeland by boat. The legend continues that their ancestors sailed to a long skinny land, believed to be Central America, and then on to a land called Tahiti Nui, which is believed to be the very large land of South America, ending up in Peru. DNA studies of the blonde-haired indigenous people of New Zealand, descendants of the Ngati Hotu tribe, have amazingly showed both Persian and Peruvian DNA, so maybe there is some truth in the legend. From Peru, the legend says that their ancestors ventured into the scattered islands of the Pacific, with one of the destinations being Easter Island, but with some ending up as far as New Zealand. Now, the reason this video is a follow-up to the one I made on the Peruvian stone walls is all because of historical timelines. In my last video, I explained how pottery and radiocarbon dates from beneath the large limestone fortress of Sacsayhuaman placed its construction at around 1100 AD, by a culture that researchers have called the Kilkay. It was American archaeologist John Howland Rowe who named the Kilkay culture based on a specific type of pottery that is found in the Cusco region before and into the early days of the Inca. I said how I think it looks like the Kilkay culture didn't just build the incredible interconnecting walls of Sacsayhuaman, but all of the other examples in the Cusco Valley, including Ollantaytambo and the city of Cusco itself. Again, this is because the Kilkay pottery, a very distinct style, is found at the foundation level of Cusco City and Sacsayhuaman, and also in just about all of the major suburbs of Cusco. The limestone of Sacsayhuaman also doesn't look weathered enough to be incredibly ancient as some believe. The Kilkay culture is quite a mystery, and may well be the result of the coming together of a number of tribes in the Cusco Valley, as well as the remnants of the Wari culture, a major power and empire that crumbled between 1000 and 1100 AD. Kilkay pottery in style is also very similar to the Wari culture. So, how did the Kilkay culture relate to the story I've just told at the start of this video? Well, in the old Maori tradition, their ancestors were driven out of Peru, which caused them to head to the islands in the Pacific. As I said in my last video, it is believed by some that the Inca defeated and drove out the pre-Inca Kilkay culture, and from then on, we don't see the monumental stonework in Peru again. So, where did the Kilkay go? Well, what happened to the earlier inhabitants of the Cusco region is not a straightforward subject because detailed archaeological studies seem to identify the Kilkay culture as pre-Inca but also part of the Proto-Inca period. They were there before the Inca Empire grew powerful, but were also there whilst the empire was developing. As stated, the Kilkay culture is really identified by their pottery, which dominated the Cusco Valley for a long time. Researcher Max Yule categorised the Kilkay pottery as post-Tiwanaku in pre-Inca Empire, broadly from 800 to 1400 AD, and was probably a style of pottery making adopted by a number of tribes in the region, tribes that could have all had different origins or could have all hailed from Tiwanaku. Radiocarbon dates show that Sacsayhuaman was built before the first king of the first Inca dynasty Manco Capac, but during the time when Quilqué pottery was dominant. The first dynasty of Inca rule consisted of 5 kings and was known as Urin Cusco, and lasted from around 1200 to 1350 AD, so there was clearly overlap with the Quilqué. Interestingly, the Quilqué pottery seems to leave the archaeological record sometime around the end of the First Dynasty, which may indicate that remnants of the older pre-Inca culture either fully assimilated with the Inca or were forced to leave or chose to leave Cusco around this time. Either way, as the Quilqué pottery gradually disappears from the archaeological record, the megalithic stonework of Cusco also stops as well, with all new architecture by the Inca being built in this crude style. So it's certainly possible that the last remaining people of the Quilqué, those that built at Cusco before the Inca arrived, left the Cusco Valley or were driven out by the Inca. So, from the architecture and the pottery, there was a change within the population, but where did this pre-Inca culture go? Well, if the ancient Maori legend is true, then maybe the Quilqué culture could in fact be the ancestors of the New Zealand tribe, leaving Peru and South America and sailing west into the Pacific. As stated, one of the destinations was Easter Island, and this actually is incredibly interesting. Although once thought to be much earlier, the Rapa Nui settlement of Easter Island is now thought to have originated around 1200 AD. Archaeological studies have said, and I quote, radiocarbon dates for the earliest stratigraphic layers at Anakina, Easter Island, and analysis of previous radiocarbon dates imply that the island was colonised late, about 1200 AD. But experts believe that the original settlers did not come from South America, because they came from the west, being Polynesian in origin. In a recent test using rib bones from 5 Easter Island inhabitants from 1445 to 1945, the DNA showed a totally Polynesian origin. But saying that, and 5 individuals is a very small sample size, and further genetic tests have shown that the modern Rapa Nui people actually have a mix of Polynesian, South American and European ancestry. Back in 2014, 27 modern Rapa Nui people were tested for their genetics, and it was found that they inherited around 8% of their DNA from Native Americans, specifically South America. The DNA can be further analysed to give an estimated date of arrival for the South Americans at Easter Island, which was between 1340 and 1445 AD. So, it looks like the Rapa Nui of Easter Island have ancestors from South America in the east and also Polynesians in the west. At Easter Island and neighbouring Polynesian islands, these two sets of people mixed and intermingled before the Europeans arrived in 1722. How the Peruvians could have reached Easter Island was also shown by the famous Kon-Tiki expedition when a Norwegian explorer named Thor Heyerdahl used a simple balsa wood raft to travel from South America to the Polynesian islands. It therefore could be achieved in pre-Columbian times. So, genetic studies show that although the majority of the Easter Islanders came from Polynesian islands, maybe Hawaii, a number of people also entered from South America between 1340 and 1445 AD. And, as we have seen, the last of the Quilqué culture left or were forced out of the Cusco region at precisely this time. Remember, the name Quilqué refers to the type of pottery found across Cusco from around 800 to 1400 AD, the same time when the megalithic stone walls were built before the Inca Empire was established. The people of the Quilqué culture could have been a number of tribes that came together during this time, but by all accounts, this culture that contained the master megalithic builders left the region. But if the Quilqué culture ended up at Easter Island, then surely we would find some evidence. And well, we may well have that evidence. As we have seen, after the Inca First Dynasty, the megalithic stone wall architecture doesn't continue in the Cusco Valley, being replaced by the more primitive Inca style that is found lying directly on top. Maybe for the Inca, speed was more important than precision for architectural works. Maybe due to the ever-expanding empire. I don't know. Maybe resources went elsewhere. The Inca were also not known for being great builders, but they were great warriors. This can be seen with the crude Inca stonework overlying the far better. It's unlikely that the stone building techniques or technology was simply lost to history, but that those with the knowledge and know-how left the area. And if you look at the stonework that appeared on Easter Island, the large megalithic interlocking stone walls that would not be out of place in the Cusco Valley, well, we can see a possible narrative emerging. The latest thinking by experts in history and archaeology, thanks to recalibrating radiocarbon dates as well as genetics, is that civilization didn't even start on Easter Island until around 1200 AD. And, as we have seen from studying the genetics of modern-day Rapa Nui people, it seems there was a Peruvian influx between 1340 and 1445. This could well be the reason we don't see an evolution of stonework on Easter Island, and why such incredible structures suddenly appear. The main Easter Island archaeological site in question is known as Ahu Vinapu, Ahu being the word for the stone platforms that support the Moai statue on the island. The ceremonial centre of Vinapu has one of the largest Ahu on the island, famous for its incredible masonry, which, as we can see, includes carefully fitted slabs of hard basalt rock, and everybody who has looked at the site can't help but compare it to the Peruvian megalithic sites like Sacsayhuaman. The stone wall also faces towards sunrise at the winter solstice. Giant Moai statues once sat on top, but were torn down in the 18th or 19th centuries. Here we can see the remnants of 6 fallen statues face down. Today there is one seemingly unfinished Moai buried in the earth and quite weathered, with the back wall of the Ahu platform behind it. These Moai are not made of hard igneous rock, but the softer volcanic tuff, hence the level of erosion. The wall has no mortar, there is at least one example of the famous nubs, and it was clearly created with great precision, and we can even see how a block was fitted into a small gap, just like we see in megalithic walls in Peru. There are also other examples of amazing architecture on Easter Island, not to mention the Moai statues themselves. There are also these stones, carefully cut and containing circular holes, used for housing with thatched upturned boats on top. The stonework again is quite incredible, and similar examples of this kind of stonework can be found in Peru. There are many incredible examples of stonework to be seen on Easter Island, but where did they get their technology from? The timeline of the South Americans' arrival at Easter Island and the end of the Quilque culture in the Inca heartland of Cusco makes me think that the two could well be linked, and because of the incredible stonework on the island, it may imply that the pre-Inca megalithic builders did sail west, taking their knowledge and techniques with them. Interestingly, in Quechan, the language of some of the native groups of the Andes, Cusco means navel of the world. Furthermore, an oral tradition says that Easter Island was also known as Tipito o Tihenua, which also means the navel of the world. Coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. The tribes of New Zealand that seem to have a Peruvian origin had blonde and red hair, and as we can see from the Moai statues of Easter Island, they have red hair also that is styled in top knots. In fact, you can trace the style of these Moai statues to Peru as well. And I'm not actually talking about the Chachapoya culture, another pre-Inca culture apparently known for having blonde hair and building statues that you could argue are similar to the Moai of Easter Island. But I'm referring to the pre-Inca Empire in the Cusco region, known as the Wari, remnants of which I do believe became part of the Quilque culture after its collapse. Look at the eyes on this Wari mummy. They do remind me of the eyes of the Moai statues. Look at the headdress or top knot on this wari ceramic, which we can clearly and directly relate to the Moai. And here's another one. Look at this ceramic and the way the hands are pointed to the navel, just as we see on the Moai. There is also so much more, and you can also relate both cultures to the much earlier Tiwanaku. There is a vast amount of evidence, including the style of art, megalithic construction and genetics, to argue that the pre-Inca Quilque culture, the megalithic stone builders left Peru and even South America sometime after 1350 and sailed west, when the Inca rapidly grew in power. Some of these people reached Easter Island, and maybe because of their knowledge and skills, they established themselves as the elite class over the Polynesians. I don't know, but apparently in history there have been power struggles on the island. So, what I'm claiming is that the enigmatic megalithic stonework that we find across the world, seemingly at different periods of time, is all because of the movement of a people, of a culture. A megalithic folk who took their knowledge, skills and expertise with them. The legend from the Maori tribe of New Zealand seems to have evidence to back it up, and if the Quilque culture, Cusco's megalithic builders, ended up on Easter Island, then we should maybe look back to the legends of New Zealand to find out more about the origins of the megalithic culture. They said that before Peru they were in Mexico, and then, before Mexico, their ancestors came from the Indus Valley. The Maori oral tradition says that 161 generations ago, their ancestors were in a hot country named Iria, which is apparently India. Roughly, this would be at around 1500 BC, which apparently was a time of turmoil in the eastern Mediterranean and also India. So, this is where I need to turn my attention to next, to ancient India and the Indus Valley, to see if we can find any evidence of megalithic stone builders, stone nubs on blocks, and blonde or red-headed people that may well be the ancestors of the Quilque and the Rapa Nui. Such finds may well confirm the Maori legend and may help us to understand more about the evolution of megalithic stone builders of the world. Such a study is not simple, linear and straightforward because of the ways that cultures evolved. On Easter Island, the people from Peru would have mixed with the native Polynesians, and then formed a new culture. The ancient people from the Indus Valley would have mixed with the native Central and Southern Americans as well. Cultures evolve and change and are influenced by many things, but knowledge can be passed down from generation to generation. I believe that the Quilque culture had a number of influences in the Cusco region, but it is likely that many of these influences can be tied to the ancient site of Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku may well have housed the true ancestors of the Quilque culture and the Rapa Nui, but can we tie Tiwanaku with earlier people from the Indus Valley? That might just be my next research project. Many see the incredible megalithic constructions around the world and see one global civilization that may have lived around 10,000 years ago. It is the most popular interpretation for what we find. But having followed the evidence, it looks as though it is more likely that we could actually be looking at a moving culture, one that moved geographically through time, mainly to escape warfare and maybe moving to survive. Each time they moved, they built magnificent stone structures, prepared the land for farming, and also carried their culture and beliefs with them. Maybe before the Indus Valley, they came from Sumer, and maybe before Sumer they came from Anatolia. And I'm not just making a wild assumption, because we do have good reason to think that Göbekli Tepe, a pre-10th millennium BC megalithic settlement, could well be the beginning of it all. Maybe there is good reason why the ancient statues of this region have similarities to statues of South America and also the famous Moai of Easter Island. The ancient civilization of Göbekli Tepe may have spread all over the world, and what we're looking at in this video, what I'm calling the megalithic culture, could simply be one branch. Easter Island may well be one of the final destinations of this megalithic culture, the last leg of a journey that spanned half the world and more than 10,000 years of history. Maybe it all began in Anatolia and Göbekli Tepe, and maybe the lost ancient civilization we are all looking for has already been discovered. Maybe they knew their time was coming to an end, and the descendants of the megalithic culture created the magnificent moai in honour of their ancestors, a memory of their culture that will surely last forever. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.